Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I want to talk about the ZT3A2. This is a missile launcher vehicle which is in the British tech tree under the South African banner. And the reason why I kind of wanted to talk about it because it very much shows to me the evolution of certain vehicles when it comes to War Thunder. Basically, the ZT3A2 when it came out was horrifically bad. It was terrible and it was broken. The aimer literally didn't work. The optics didn't line up with where the missile actually went. So for a period of a decent amount of months, the ZT3A2 was pretty much unusable. And then they did some changes to the missile, made it more powerful, made it better and easier to track. Then they made changes to the optics, which meant that you could kind of hide a lot of the vehicle while you were using it. And then after that, they also then buffed it again. So basically what you have now is nothing close to what it came out as, which is what happens with a lot of these vehicles, meaning that when sometimes people make reviews like years ago or even 6 months ago, the vehicle can be completely different the day that it's talked about. And that's something that's very key in War Thunder. Recently, I've actually had quite a lot of people basically ask me about some of the old reviews I've done, talking about how useful certain vehicles were when it came to grinding and how nowadays they just aren't that useful. You know, kind of getting duped into the fact that a vehicle is good because of, you know, the fact that it was good in the past and no longer is good, because of the vehicles that have been put around it. Now, the ZT3A2 is kind of the opposite. It came out as bad, and now it's a lot better than it was. So at least there's that. You know, things can improve over time, or they can get worse over time. So always take into account when something is created to be able to kind of see what's, you know, going on with it. War Thunder changes so much every year. You get new mechanics basically every few months, you get new events every other week, and also you get 5 major updates a year which have all completely crazy game-changing stuff in it. So you've got to be careful when you look at when stuff is from, even guides in terms of like, you know, controls or the things like that, because even those change all the time. So let's talk about this thing, the ZT3. This is an actual competent ATGM carrier. Now, I dislike ATGM carriers. I don't think they're fun. I think generally they're a waste of time because of 2 factors. The mobility of them is usually pretty bad. The fact that you have to sit there stationary while firing a shot and leading it onto the target, and also their lack of survivability in terms of the vehicle itself. Basically, there is a lot of things which work against these ATGM launchers compared to standard MBTs, which is why you never see ATGM launchers compared to standard MBTs or light tanks. Also, the evolution of light tanks over time, where they've just got more and more powerful, and the ATGM launchers just kind of sit there and wonder why they exist. Yeah, it's not exactly fantastic. They also are labeled as SPGs. They don't get access to artillery. They don't get access to scouting or anything like that. So basically you have worse weaponry, worse mobility, worse armor, and less mechanics by all of the meta stuff that's around. So yeah, why would you ever play them? Well, the reason I play them is because some of them actually are kind of fun and useful, and also at the same time I like to have different experiences in War Thunder. I like to see why these things are at the BR that there are. Now, a lot of the time I can't see that. I don't understand why the Chrysanthema is such a high BR, for example. The Sturm S is in exactly the same boat, but the ZT3A2, I can understand it. One of the key things about this vehicle, compared to 90% of ATGM carriers that are in War Thunder, is something which is really interesting. It's the fact that you have 3 ATGMs ready to go. And that means that if one of them doesn't connect properly, or you just kind of maim a vehicle, you can fire off the next one very quickly to the target, which I think is really awesome. It also has the beam riding guidance instead of the wire guidance, which a lot of other ATGMs have around this BR. The wire guidance is a little bit more loopy, it's a little bit more slow, and it takes harder to kind of change direction, where beam riding in general is faster and also is a little bit more responsive, so that kind of helps it quite a lot. The other thing about the ZT3A2 as well is you have 2 different missiles, one that you unlock at rank 3 and the other one that you start with. You have the ZT3A1, which is kind of like a standard ATGM, but then you get the ZT3A2, which is a tandem charge anti-tank guided missile. This means that it can penetrate a target, and because of the TNT equivalent in it, which is 3.58 kilos, it can actually overpressure targets through it, which does really well. It also has up to 1,000 millimeters of penetration, so you're basically going through anything that you can fight. The missiles on this thing are actually really powerful and work extremely well, even against the RA or even against chemical protection, which is designed to stop, the missiles. Now, it's based on the Rattle chassis. The Rattle chassis is awful. It has no armor, it's incredibly slow, and all of the crew at the same time is in the front of it, meaning that if somebody just sees the front of you, you die, and that isn't incredibly fun. So yeah, that's a problem. Survivability is basically 0 on this, but that's just, the standard life of an ATGM carrier. What is cool about this one is you can actually hide the vast majority of the vehicle behind a hill. So you actually have the gunner's optics, which is just below the ATGM launcher. And what that means is you can use the gunner optics to see stuff and then actually hide the vast majority of your crew from harm, and then just stick the ATGM launcher up above a hill and then shoot people from there. It works fantastically well, and it basically means that you are survivable through that. So instead of being survivable through armor, you're survivable through your optics, and I think that's really cool. Now, you can still die from people shooting at you. If they hit your launcher and there's an ATGM in there, or even if there isn't an ATGM in there, you'll get overpressured and die. But at least a lot of the time you're able to get the first kind of shot off because of the fact that you are hid and therefore people don't see you as well. The other thing is this has really good thermals, so spotting targets from miles away is something that's really nice to do. You also technically have a laser rangefinder, but that's kind of worthless unless you want to see how long it's going to take your missile to get there, because these missiles are pretty slow, 342 meters per second for the ZT3A2. But at least, that means that you can move the missile around a decent amount, which is quite nice. And also there are smoke grenades, which are very, very useful for a machine like this when you need to reposition or if CAS is around. Because once again, guess what? This is not surviving any CAS element coming in and just nuking you. So that is another problem. You also have a 7.62, I suppose, if you want to use that. But once again, it just doesn't make any difference for the vehicle. So at 8.3 for Britain, you already have a pretty stacked lineup, right? So you have the Vickers Mark III, you have the Vigilante, you have the Roycat, you have the Chieftain Marksman, the ZA35, you also have the Warrior as well. Like, you have all of these elements, and this actually works in the ATGM's favor. So one of the things about stuff like the ZT3A2 is, as a vehicle, one of the key problems with it is when, or just in ATGM carriers in general, when you actually have to use them as banger vehicles. Like, when it's the center point of your lineup, there is going to be a problem because you just can't do enough damage. You can't do enough, and that sucks. It is kind of how it is. So in this lineup, you use it as a secondary, where if you get on a map, which works very well for it, then you can use that. A large map with maybe some hills and areas where you can hide the chassis, but then also get the ATGMs off. And that means that you can generally work very well with it. And then you can use stuff like the Vickers, the Warrior, things like even the ZA35 as your main vehicles, and then have that in reserve if you need to use it in certain areas. And I think that's actually really cool. So for me, that's, very important and nice that you can do that. Now, my stats in the thing, we had 69 battles, 95 ground kills, 6 air kills, surprisingly, because a lot of hovering helicopters, and 57 deaths. So around about a 2-to-1 KD, 59% win rate, which also is quite nice. And compared to a lot of the other vehicles that I played recently, it actually felt quite nice. But just understand, in the past, it was horrific to play. And also, it's still a situational vehicle, so it's still worse than the Vickers Mark III, it's still worse than the Warrior, it's still worse than the AAs. But at least nowadays, it actually has a place, and it has a play style. where previously it was bugged, it didn't work, and also at the same time, its missiles weren't as good. So let me know if you've enjoyed this vehicle. I know quite a few people who have enjoyed it over the years. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Warthunder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.